Ornithopter. Based on some of history's earliest flying machines, the free-to-cast O2 Flyer is one of Magic's most recognizable cards, first printed in antiquities and still receiving reprints to this day. But decades before the artifact's first printing in 1994, Frank Herbert introduced the ornithopter into the sci-fi and fantasy lexicon in his 1965 book, Dune. Even with Dune's recent explosion in popularity thanks to the movies by Denis Villeneuve, Dune's outsized influence on genre fiction remains underacknowledged and downright hard to wrap your head around. With its giant sandworms, scrying and fortune-telling, and its recent forays into the aesthetics of outer space with Unfinity and Edge of Eternities, Magic the Gathering owes as much to Dune as anyone, which begs the question, are we ever getting a universes beyond Dune? Hi, my name's Alessio, I'm a 15-year Commander player, and I hate Magic's Universes Beyond sets for the simple reason that I love making custom cards based on outside characters and stories. And it's not just me. If you're unfamiliar with Star Wars The Gathering, do yourself a favor and give it a look. It's a series of fan-made sets totally committed to synthesizing the characters and story of Star Wars through Magic mechanics that has been free to print out and draft and play for years. When you look at the work and love put into Star Wars The Gathering and so many other fan projects, it's pretty clear what's going on. The community invented Magic crossovers, and Wizards has stolen it just so they can sell it right back to us. That's my rant on that. If you don't like it, please yell at me in the comments and boost this video's algo. Everyone else, buckle in, because if Universes Beyond Dune is inevitable, I'm claiming it for the fans today, and I've got a Spice Hoard's worth of custom Dune cards to prove it. A modern spin on Star Wars The Gathering, Universes Beyond Dune is a set of 16 commander decks meant to tell the story and capture the feeling of all 6 books in Frank Herbert's original Dune Chronicles. These decks are book first in the same way UB Spider-Man was based on the comics, but not book only. I will be nodding to some iconic moments from all 3 major film adaptations, as well as drawing on them for art and flavor text. This won't be too noticeable in our first 4 decks, since all 3 adaptations are very faithful to Book 1 in their own ways, but if you want to be sure to catch every reference you can, grab a book reader buddy, and they'll be delighted to fill you in on anything you miss. Disclaimer, I haven't playtested these decks, nor do I claim to be a skilled designer of Magic cards or environments, but my intent here is for these decks to have interplay with one another, to build on a core series of mechanical themes just as the books build on their literary themes, and to present a convincing vision of what Dune could look like in Magic the Gathering. I'm also shooting for them to feel as close to boxed Commander Precons as possible, prioritizing fun and variance over game-warping cards and optimized lines to victory. I'm designing 32 original cards for each deck, and filling out the rest of the 99 with existing cards that play into the given theme, while doing everything I can to minimize breaking the immersion through flavor mismatches. No cards called Llanowar, whatever, or Urza's Blah. Wizards and ogres are okay in moderation, but no Vidalkins, no angels, no zombies, or any other fantasy life forms that don't exist in Dune. Today I'm going to be breaking down my design for Fremen Foresight, one of 4 decks based on the major factions in the first book in the Dune Chronicles, or Dune Part 1 and Part 2 if you're a movie person. This deck aims to showcase the Fremen under the leadership of their prophesized savior, Paul Muad'Dib, and how they combine physical and mental techniques to create an overwhelming, lethal force. Fremen Foresight is a blue-green deck, also known as Simic. For every deck in the series, I chose colors that matched the faction at a philosophical level, while also tying those colors to wider cultures and factions in the Dune universe. Green, the color of nature, here represents the Fremen and their close, symbiotic relationship with the harsh desert planet Arrakis. While there aren't any forests on Arrakis, yet, green is nonetheless the color most closely associated with land, and of course, the worm creature type, which includes sandworms. And blue, the color of mind, represents both the influence of the Bene Gesserit on Fremen culture and the mind-expanding power of the spice melange that is ever present on Arrakis, from the food you eat to the air you breathe. And it's pretty aesthetically convenient for us that Fremen happen to have deep blue eyes. If you watched our Atreides Acumen video, you know blue was also a color adjacent to the Atreides. so adding blue to green here really helps tell the story of Paul and Jessica introducing the Fremen to new skills and vice versa. At a mechanical level, blue is the color most closely associated with scrying and top-deck manipulation, which is also one of Magic's primary metaphors for seeing the future, as Muad'Dib learns to do. The Simic colors together suggest a faction that thinks deeply, acts with purpose, and which sees both the human psyche and the unforgiving cycle of natural life as powerful, mystical forces. While I've of course developed some of my own mechanical innovations to bring Dune to life in Magic the Gathering, I've tried to primarily draw from existing playstyles and mechanics, as official pre-constructed decks tend to revive and build on past concepts rather than introducing their own brand new ideas. The primary Fremen mechanics are top-deck manipulation and casting spells from exile, with a splash of worm and desert synergies to add to the flavor. Manipulating the top cards of your deck is key to setting up many of this deck's explosive plays, and the two original mechanics I've come up with for Universes Beyond Dune both help achieve this setup. Prescience is a keyword of my own design that appears across many decks in Universes Beyond Dune. Featured primarily on Advisors, the creature type representing the Bene Gesserit and Mentats, permanents with Prescience allow you to look at the top card of your library at any time, and the top card of the library of any player who doesn't have a permanent with Prescience. This is a reference to how two characters with Prescience, such as Paul Muad'Dib and Edric the Guild Navigator, cannot see what the other is thinking and doing in their visions of the future. While Prescience does have a very specific meaning in Dune related to seeing the future, it here is a catch-all representing a variety of mental techniques, such as Mentat projection and Bene Gesserit truth sense. Spice tokens are another original mechanic for Universes Beyond Dune, representing the all-important Spice melange. Spice are artifact tokens that can be tapped and sacrificed to activate 3 simultaneous abilities: gain 1 life, scry 1, and put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. In a world where everything seems to make food and clues and treasures, and artifact tokens have completely reshaped the way we play Magic, and Commander especially, we would expect nothing less from the most valuable substance in the known universe. Foretell and Suspend are Magic's even more literal tools for depicting future characters or events who have yet to materialize in the present. These mechanics are in some ways polar opposites, with Suspend giving you a mana discount if you're willing to wait a few turns to resolve your spell, and Foretell often costing you more mana, but with the flexibility of being able to spread it out over several turns. What the two mechanics share in common is that they both use Exile to store these future cards until they are ready to be cast. As a result, cards in Fremen Foresight provide you with value and bonuses whenever you cast any spell from exile, uniting Foretell and Suspend as complementary mechanics in a deck flavored around a clairvoyant prophet trying to steer events in a better direction for humanity. Worms and deserts have both been pretty well developed in Magic already, so we're including as many as we can as reprints, alongside some individual modular designs that give you optional upside for playing with them. Fremen Foresight is far from a worm typal deck, but there just may be one of those coming down the pipe later in the series. If you think you know who might be commanding that deck, leave your best spoiler-free guesses in the comments. Before we get to the card-by-card deck breakdown, I have one more piece of preamble, and it's a brief note about Magic Dune crossovers in general. Please stop making Dune theme decks and altars with Hazezon Tamar or Hazezon Shaper of Sand representing Paul. Do whatever you want, of course, I'm being dramatic, but I think it's worth discussing the reasons why this bothers me so much. Reason 1, I've seen it again and again and again and again. It's played out, it's not creative. Reason 2, Hazezon makes tokens with the type line Sand Warrior. Sand is a creature type, it's a race. But the Fremen are human. They're not elementals, they're not magical sand apparitions Paul summons. And reason 3, which is probably the most important one, is that there's so much more to Dune than just deserts. The entire reason Paul is successful on Arrakis is because he brings the Fremen new ways to fight beyond desert power. I would go so far as to say that a Muad'Dib card without blue anywhere in its color identity really misses the point of the character's arc. So needless to say, our face commander, Paul Muad'Dib, Fremen Mahdi, will take him in a whole other direction.
He's 2 blue-green for a 4/4 human demigod noble, with that demigod creature type denoting his awakened Kwisatz Haderach status. He has the new prescience mechanic, which can help you see what's on top of your deck and time your plays with Paul's other abilities. When he attacks, he lets you foretell the top card of your library, of course reducing the casting cost by 2 generic when you cast it on a following turn. And whenever you cast a spell from exile, foretold, suspended, or otherwise, Paul puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. However, if it's the second time you've resolved this ability this turn, instead of a +1/+1 counter, that creature can't be blocked this turn. Paul sees the future, and when that future finally comes to pass, your creatures are emboldened and rush in on your opponents for game. I can hear the comments already. Why doesn't Paul do anything with worms? Why doesn't Paul do anything with deserts? Don't worry, I've got you sickos covered if you're willing to play with the deck's slower but more flexible backup commander, Liet Kynes, Planetologist. He's 3 hybrid blue or green mana for a 2/2 human druid. Druid being the creature type we're using to denote Fremen in Universes Beyond Dune. Liet gives lands in your hand cycling 2, and you create 2 spice tokens whenever a desert enters or goes into your graveyard. And the first time you scry each turn, you can put one of the cards you scried into exile instead of back into your deck, put a number of time counters on it equal to its mana value, and give it suspend. And you're going to be scrying a whole lot if you can keep that spice flowing. I'm really happy with how this card lets you play with all the same payoffs as Paul, but you come at the strategy from the suspend side rather than the foretell side, and lean into themes of ecology and life cycle rather than clairvoyance and prophecy. Putting famous actors on Magic cards is always going to be a little weird to me, but if we're going to do it, yeah, let's put Max von Sydow on a Magic card. That just goes so hard. Can we get a North by Northwest Secret Lair with Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint? Orson Welles card, legendary creature, human citizen. Chani, yes, that's how Frank Herbert pronounced it. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Faithful Sayadina has foretell because of the many visions Paul has of her before and during his time on Arrakis. She's a 1/1 human druid with Desert Walk for 1 and a green. When Chani deals combat damage to a player, you put that many -1/-1 counters on target creature. And whenever a creature with 1 or more -1/-1 counters dies, you put the same number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. And if you cast her for her foretell cost of 1 green, target land becomes a desert, ensuring that she can get in for damage and start triggering those abilities thanks to her Desert Walk. Reverend Mother Jessica loses red from the version of her in Atreides Acumen, now loyal only to the other memories she gained in the Spice Agony. She's still a 3/2 human advisor with prescience, but this time she costs 3 blue. Whenever Jessica attacks, each player exiles the top card of their library. If 2 cards that share a card type were exiled this way, return target permanent to its owner's hand. If 3 of those cards shared a card type, exile that permanent instead. And if all 4 cards you revealed share a creature type, exile up to 1 target permanent each player controls instead. And if that wasn't enough, when Jessica dies, you may play all cards exiled with her until the end of your next turn. If you're paying attention at home, that means both the cards that flip off the top of each player's deck, and any cards she's able to exile from the board based on what you flip. Stilgard, Naib of Siege Tabr, is one of the greatest believers in Muad'Dib, so he accelerates you to your prophesized future. He's a 4/3 human druid with trample for 2 green. The first time you scry each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and whenever Stilgard deals combat damage to a player, you may choose one of the following. You can remove that many time counters from target card you own in exile with a time counter on it, or the next foretold spell you cast this turn costs 1 less for each damage dealt this way. Alia Atreides Preborn is a 1/1 human advisor with prescience, who can either be cast for 2 and a blue, or with her foretell cost of 1 and a blue. If you've only ever seen the Villeneuve movies, surprise. In the book we actually get to see Paul's sister be born with memories of thousands and thousands of years of past lives that kind of make her older than everyone around her, even though she's a baby. Anyway, whenever you cast this spell from exile or another spell from exile, tap target creature and put a stun counter on it. Or, if this is the second resolution of this ability this turn, Alia gains Death Touch until end of turn instead. The Death Touch in blue is an intentional color pie break to hammer home just how weird baby Alia is to everyone around her, and because even though Paul is the one to kill Baron Harkonnen in the movie, in the book, it's actually Alia who kills the Baron using the poisoned gum Jabbar, a really epic moment that movie watchers got deprived of. Probably the single biggest reason to watch the Lynch version over Villeneuve, honestly. Yamis, friend to Muad'Dib, is a 3/3 human druid who can be cast for 3 green or suspended with 3 time counters for 2 and a green. When Yamis enters, target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. And whenever a time counter is removed from this card, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. I'll forgive Villeneuve for leaving Alia on the cutting room floor, because I really love the scenes where Paul has visions of Yamis in Dune Part 1, where he's seeing this future where he and Yamis could be great friends and Yamis would be a mentor to him, only to meet Yamis in real life and have to kill him. And those visions are exactly what that second ability on Yamis is there to represent. And our final legendary creature in this deck is Reverend Mother Ramallo, a 2/5 human advisor with prescience for 5 blue. When Ramallo enters, you create a spice token for each mana from a desert that you used to cast her. And whenever you sacrifice 1 or more spice, you may return an artifact, enchantment, or land card from your graveyard to your hand. Let's move on to our other rares and mythics. Sisterhood of the Bene Gesserit is part of a cycle of monocolor sagas that perpetuate themselves when they reach their final chapter, showing how the major past events in the Dune universe continue to impact things in the present. Chapter 1 of this saga goads target creature, and you note its power. Stay with me here. Chapter 2 says gain control of target creature, untap it, note its toughness, and when this card leaves the battlefield, sacrifice that creature. And the mysterious long game finally comes to fruition in Chapter 3. You create Kwisatz Haderach, a blue legendary human demigod creature token with hexproof, prescience, and the noted power and the noted toughness. Then you exile the saga until Kwisatz Haderach leaves the battlefield. The Bene Gesserit have had many failures over the generations in their attempts to create a super being, so if your super powerful token doesn't work out, no problem, they come right back and start from scratch. The Water of Life is part of yet another cycle of legendary X spells of different card types that represent the universe's major religious belief systems. The Water of Life is a legendary artifact with the spice subtype that costs X blue to cast. It enters with X charge counters, and whenever you sacrifice it, you exile cards from the top of your library until you've exiled a number of land cards this way equal to the number of charge counters that were on it. Cards exiled this way gain, you may play this card from exile as long as you have sacrificed 2 or more spice this turn. And of course, because this is a spice, it has the standard spice ability where you can tap it and sacrifice it to gain a life, scry, and put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Your patience is rewarded. We've finally made it to our first sandworm, and it's the big one. Old Man of the Desert is an 8/8 worm with trample for 6 green. When Old Man of the Desert enters, create 3 spice tokens. And that's pretty convenient because you can sacrifice 3 spice to put Old Man of the Desert from your graveyard on top of your library, exactly where you want it to synergize with your commander. Lisan al-Gaib is part of another cycle of 2-color sagas, showing mostly more recent events in the Dune story. At Chapter 1, you create a 2/2 blue human advisor creature token with prescience, and you scry 2. This represents the Bene Gesserit sending their Missionaria Protectiva to Arrakis many years before Paul's birth to plant and spread the manufactured myth of the savior from another world. Hope you paid attention when you scried, because Chapter 2 lets you reveal the top card of any library and put a number of +1/+1 counters on target creature you control equal to the revealed card's mana value. That creature also becomes a noble. This of course represents Paul arriving on Arrakis and being identified as that prophesized savior. If you reveal a big worm with mana value 6 or 7, you're literally doing the sand riding scene from Part 2. And Chapter 3 says, choose a noble you control. Put a number of +1/+1 counters on each other creature you control equal to that creature's power. Now that Paul has accepted the mantle of Lisan al-Gaib, he's building up his army and leading them into battle. Shai Hulud's command is an instant for 3 and a green, and like all commands, it says choose 2, with the options being create a spice token, target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn, and trample if it's also a druid, prevent all combat damage by non-worm sources until end of turn, and return a desert you control or a desert card in your graveyard to your hand. The commands in each of the other Book 1 decks all have color identities that map perfectly onto the commander's color identity, but we kept this one to just green to show how the Fremen revere nature and the sandworms rather than some arbitrarily elected noble or ruler. Siege Tabr is this deck's rare ability land. It's a desert that taps for a colorless, or you can pay 2 green-blue and tap it. If you own a card in exile with a time counter on it, draw a card. And if you own a foretold card in exile, draw a card. Coriolis Storm, a devastating weather event on Arrakis, is a sorcery for 3 green-green that can also be cast with its foretell cost of X blue-blue. It lets you choose one or more. Destroy all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, and return all non-worm creatures with toughness X or less to their owner's hand. We're having a little fun with design space here. Note that you can only use that third ability if you cast Coriolis Storm with its foretell cost, because if you hard cast it, there's no X. Moving on to the uncommons, Fedaykin Death Commando is 1 green-blue for a 3/3 human berserker. Yes, there is a very specific reason why this is a berserker and not a druid, and you are going to have to wait all the way till the end of the series to find out why. The Death Commando says whenever you scry, choose 1. You can pay 2, and if you do, create a token copy of this card. Or you can pay 4 to create a 6/6 green worm creature token with trample. But you can only use this option if you already control 3 permanents named Fedaykin Death Commando. Fedaykin Sand Rider is another human berserker, a 5/4 for 4 and a green. It reduces the cost of worm spells you cast by 2 generic, and as long as you control a worm, this creature gains vigilance and trample. Give Water to the Dead is a very flavor-forward card representing the scene where Paul sheds tears over Yamis's death. It's an enchantment for 2 and a green, and it says whenever a creature dies, you may pay 1 blue mana. If you do, each player may reveal the top card of their library. Any player who reveals a creature card this way can put it onto the battlefield. Any player who reveals a land card this way creates a spice token. And any player who revealed a non-creature, non-land card this way puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Group Hug is not necessarily part of this deck's game plan, but because you have so much more access to Scry and Prescience than the other decks at the table, you are going to be able to time your activations of this to make sure you get the most value. Ravenous Maker is a 4/4 worm with trample for 1 green. When it deals combat damage to a player, you create a spice token. They don't call them makers for nothing. And when it dies, you create Chris Knife, an equipment artifact token with equip 2, and whenever you cast a spell from exile, put a +1/+1 counter on equipped creature. And we're keeping the worms coming with Shai Hulud Manifest, a 5/5 worm with trample for 4 green, who makes a spice token at the beginning of your end step. Or hopefully 2 spice tokens, because if you cast Shai Hulud Manifest from exile, you get to copy it and slam down 2 5/5s for the price of 1. Spannungsbogen, let me cook, is a term from one of my favorite epigraphs at the top of a chapter in Book 1 that discusses how the Fremen are known for their ability to wait with indefinite patience before reaching out for something they want. This quality is represented here as an enchantment for green and a blue that rewards you for the number of cards you have pre-cast in exile and discourages you from advancing the board state in traditional ways. Whenever you remove a time counter from a card you own in exile, you gain 1 life. Other permanents you control have ward X, where X is the number of foretold cards you own, but whenever you cast a spell from your hand, sacrifice Spannungsbogen. Worm Sign does pretty much everything you want to do in this deck. It's a sorcery for 5 green that can be suspended with 4 time counters for 4 and a green. On cast, Worm Sign creates a 6/6 worm with trample, and then puts itself right back into exile with 4 time counters on it. And whenever a time counter is removed from Worm Sign, you create a spice token. And moving on to the commons, Fremen Survival Skills is part of a common cycle of auras that represent the kinds of training each of our major factions bestows upon their acolytes and apprentices. For 1 and a green, Fremen Survival Skills gives enchanted creature +1/+3 and reach, and whenever enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, create a spice token. Because each of these decks has 2 of the training auras, we also have a copy of Bene Gesserit Training. For 1 and a blue, Bene Gesserit Training gives enchanted creature Prowess and Prescience, and whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, goad target creature that player controls. Light Path to Arrakis is our last cycled card in this deck, an Evolving Wilds variant with archetypal upside. You can tap and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic forest, basic island, or a desert, and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And whenever Light Path to Arrakis is put into a graveyard by any means, say it with me, create a spice token. Each of these decks also has a few artifact cards representing mundane, commonplace technologies in Dune, such as the Desert Thumper. It costs 3 generic, and on entering, it goads target creature, drawing the worm to you. And if you can find some way to get this off the board, or someone is dumb enough to destroy it, you can search your library for a non-human creature and put it on top of your library. The Frem kit costs 2 generic, and it's a bit of a Swiss Army knife. You can pay 1 blue and tap it to scry 2. You can pay 1 and green and tap it to untap another target permanent. You can pay 1 blue-green and tap it to draw a card, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a land card. Or at sorcery speed, you can pay 4 generic and tap it to exile target creature you control. You may cast that card from exile until Fremkit exiles another creature this way. You may be able to use that last ability to save a creature you control from a board wipe you see coming, but it's also there to make sure that you can always cast something from exile when you want to trigger an effect, much like our next card, Furtive Kangaroo Mouse. Our little Muad'Dib is a 0/1 mouse for 1 green, and whenever you scry, you may cast the Furtive Kangaroo Mouse from exile until end of turn. Deck space in Commander these days is so tight, so there's nothing I love more than a ramp spell that has some relevant upside. Sandwalk is a sorcery for 1 green-blue. It lets you search your library for a basic land or desert and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then if you control 3 or more deserts, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Removal's pretty rough in these colors, but fortunately we've got Siege Duel, an instant for 2 and a green that can be suspended with 3 time counters for 1 and a green. It gives target creature you control +1/+1 until end of turn for each desert you control, and then that creature fights target creature you don't control. If any creature died in the fight, you put Siege Duel right back into exile with 3 time counters on it and get ready for the next bout. And this wouldn't be a Fremen deck if we didn't have the Still Suit, an artifact for 4 generic. While desert cards tend to tap for colorless mana, the Still Suit lets them tap for any color. You can pay 1 to put a storage counter on Still Suit, but only if that mana came from a desert. And you can tap Still Suit and remove all storage counters from it to add that much colorless mana or gain that much life. And we wrap things up with a copy of Truth Sense, an instant for 2 blue-blue. It counters target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 3, and if you sacrificed a spice as you cast Truth Sense, it also counters every spell on the stack that wasn't cast from a player's hand. Get those commanders out of here. If these decks were made by Wizards of the Coast, they'd likely all have original Dune-themed art. So for each deck, I've chosen 2 staple cards to give an alt art treatment to. And here we have Inspiring Refrain and Beast Within. Inspiring Refrain is better than any card I could have ever designed to represent the famous Litany Against Fear. I must not fear, fear is the mind killer. Card draw is Magic's way of showing a powerful, healthy mind, and this card's use of self-perpetuating Suspend, which I've riffed on in the original designs here, is not only a perfect fit for this deck mechanically, but it mirrors how characters repeat the litany over and over until they can think calmly and clearly. And Beast Within, a much-needed removal tool in these colors, nods to the brutality Paul's actions lead to, despite his best attempts to broker peace, featuring art from his Visions of the Holy War. If you click the link in the description to see the full deck list, including all reprints, look for cards like Sandworm Convergence, Desert Twister, Veiling Oddity, and Saw It Coming, that either complement the themes of the deck, fit the flavor, or themselves inspired some of these original designs. Special shout out to Desert Twister, a card most of you probably have never even seen. All of its modern printings feature the flavor text, massive, mindless, and imbued with one terrible purpose. Not only do Paul and Jessica fly into a Desert Twister in the first book and film, but terrible purpose is a key refrain in the first book as Paul slowly realizes that he's been chosen by fate to set humanity on a new path. And that's it for Fremen Foresight. If you thought this was cool, please give us a like and comment with your favorite design, and definitely let me know what your experience was like if you tried these out in paper or on Tabletop Simulator. And make sure to subscribe for notifications on the next Universes Beyond Dune video.